That night at the Plaza Hotel, beneath the crystal chandeliers and the sound of champagne glasses touching, my entire world cracked open in a way I never saw coming. I had come to support my husband David at his company's annual gala, hoping the evening would soften the tension that had been building between us for months. Instead, it became the moment that shattered every illusion I had about my marriage. I remember standing near a marble column, smoothing my simple navy dress when I saw David across the ballroom. He wasn't alone. His hand rested on the waist of a young woman in a glittering silver gown, a woman I recognized but never expected to see draped over him. Ava Collins, his ambitious junior analyst. The way she leaned into him wasn't accidental. It was intimate, practiced, and far too familiar. At first I thought I was mistaken, that the dim lights had tricked my eyes. But then David looked up. Our gaze locked. Instead of pulling away from her, he tightened his hold, almost as if he wanted me to see it. Something inside me froze. My breath caught. The music, the voices, the clinking glass, it all blurred into a distant hum as though I were sinking underwater. I tried to move toward him, but my legs felt heavy, glued to the polished floor. It wasn't just betrayal I saw in his eyes. It was indifference, the kind that cuts deeper than anger. Then Ava turned, her lips curling into a small, victorious smile, the kind meant to humiliate. She whispered something to David, and he nodded, barely sparing me another glance. That was when I realized the truth. This wasn't a mistake or a slip. This was planned. This was deliberate. And everyone around us, his colleagues, his friends, began to notice the tension in the air. I felt their eyes on me, pitying, judging, dissecting my pain. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, pretending to check a message just to keep myself from breaking apart. All I wanted was to disappear, to run out into the Manhattan night and never look back. But before I could move, something happened that made the entire ballroom go silent. David stepped onto the stage as the spotlight hit him, Ava still beside him, her hand intertwined with his as if she belonged there. And then, right in front of everyone, he did the unthinkable. The audience gasped, but David didn't flinch. He stood there as if what he had done was normal, as if tearing apart a marriage in public was simply another bold career move. My knees weakened, and I had to grip the edge of a nearby table to keep from collapsing. Shame burned through me as the room seemed to close in. My attention stayed locked on the stage, on the man I had loved for 7 years, the man who was now using humiliation as a declaration of independence. A manager dimmed the lights slightly, trying to restore order, but the damage was done. Every pair of eyes that turned toward me felt like another weight added to my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my voice was gone. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. And then, just when I thought the moment couldn't get worse, David said something that made my blood run cold. The crowd waited, breath held in heavy silence. He announced he was starting a new chapter tonight, and it didn't include me. Before everything collapsed, my life looked simple from the outside, almost peaceful in a way people mistake for happiness. I worked as a front-of-house manager at a small boutique hotel near Central Park, a quiet place with warm lighting, fresh flowers in the lobby, and guests who preferred calm over glamour. I liked my job, not because it was impressive, but because it made me feel useful, connected, steady. Every morning I walked to work with a cup of Starbucks in my hand, watching the sunlight crawl across Manhattan's brownstones. Those walks were the parts of my day when I felt closest to myself. At home, though, things were different. David and I lived in a modest apartment on the Upper West Side, the kind with thin walls and a hallway that always smelled like someone else's cooking. I used to love that apartment. It was the place where we spent our first Christmas together, where we argued about which rug to buy, where we talked about the children we hoped to have someday. But over the past year, it stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a waiting room. Quiet, tense, filled with invisible distance. We had been trying to have a baby for 2 years. Doctor visits, vitamins, schedules, hope that rose and broke over and over again. Every negative test felt like a small funeral. David used to hold me, tell me it wasn't my fault, that we had time. But slowly, something changed. He began coming home late, brushing off my questions, saying work was demanding, that the firm was preparing for a big expansion. He spent more time staring at his MacBook Pro than talking to me. Even when he sat beside me on the couch, I felt alone. I tried to fix things the only way I knew how, by giving more. Cooking his favorite meals, leaving encouraging notes in his briefcase, keeping our arguments soft so they wouldn't push him further away. But the more I tried, the colder he became. Sometimes he would look at me as if he were searching for a version of me that no longer existed, one I didn't know how to bring back. The signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. The faint perfume on his shirt, that wasn't mine. The unexplained charges on our credit card. The way he guarded his phone, turning it face down during dinner, taking it with him even to the shower. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself every couple goes through rough patches. I told myself love was worth fighting for. Michael, his longtime friend, noticed before I did. He occasionally dropped by the hotel to check on me during his lunch breaks from New York Presbyterian. He always had this calm way of looking at me, as if he could see through the smile I used to hide my exhaustion. Once he even said, "Emily, you look tired. Are you sure everything's okay?" I laughed it off, but a part of me wished he had pressed harder. Still, I kept believing. I clung to the hope that if I was patient, if I worked harder, if I stayed gentle, things would return to normal. I didn't realize the truth. I was the only one fighting. 2 weeks before the gala, something small but unforgettable happened. I found a silver earring in the pocket of David's coat, delicate, sparkly, nothing like anything I owned. When I showed it to him, he didn't flinch. He simply shrugged and said it belonged to a colleague who must have leaned too close during a conversation. He said it with such confidence that I forced myself to believe him. But deep down, a quiet fear began growing inside me, slowly spreading through every corner of my heart. I didn't know it then, but that fear was the first warning of the storm that would soon break open my entire life. And still, I had no idea what was coming next, until one message on his phone made everything impossible to ignore. By the time the tension in our marriage became impossible to ignore, David had already mastered the art of pretending everything was fine. He moved through our apartment with a kind of distant efficiency, answering emails on his MacBook Pro while barely acknowledging my presence. Every evening, he came home later than the night before, claiming he had meetings or client dinners on Park Avenue. I wanted to believe him, but the shift in his tone, the guarded way he spoke, told a different story. Even simple conversations felt strained, like we were speaking across a widening canyon neither of us dared to name. The warmth that once filled our home had vanished, replaced by quiet spaces where love used to live. At work, I noticed how distracted I had become. I made small mistakes I never used to make, double-booking reservations, forgetting to restock the coffee station, even greeting regular guests with the wrong names. My mind kept drifting back to the coldness in David's eyes each morning. Meanwhile, the world around me carried on, tourists taking photos in the lobby, business travelers polishing presentations on their tablets, families asking for directions to Central Park. I felt like a spectator inside my own life. The worst part was how normal everything looked, how easily people walked past me without sensing the storm slowly gathering inside. I told myself to focus, but the questions kept returning, sharp and relentless. What changed? When did I lose him? And why didn't he want to talk to me anymore? At home, dinner became the quietest part of our day. We sat across from each other, eating in near silence while the city hummed outside our window. David kept his phone beside him at all times, the screen lighting up with messages he never bothered to explain. I pretended not to notice, telling myself that pushing him would only make things worse. One evening, he stepped away to take a call, and his voice softened in a way it never did with me anymore. I didn't hear the words, but I heard the tenderness. When he returned, he avoided my eyes and finished his meal quickly, as though being in the same room with me felt like an obligation he couldn't wait to escape. I washed the dishes alone, hands trembling under the warm water. Little by little, the distance between us became a living thing. It followed us down the hallway, settled on the couch between us, and lay at the foot of our bed. Even our weekends, filled with walks and mornings, turned into separate routines. David claimed he needed to rest or catch up on work, but I knew better. His heart wasn't here anymore, and mine was breaking trying to pretend it was. The worst moment came one Saturday afternoon when his phone lit up, and I saw a name flash across the screen: Ava. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. When I asked why she was calling, he waved it off, saying she needed help with a project. His voice was too casual, quick, and that was when something in me shifted. I began to realize that love wasn't supposed to feel like begging for scraps of attention. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Manhattan traffic. I felt a truth forming in me, unavoidable. Something was wrong, and I could no longer pretend it was else. And still I had no proof, only fear. Until the next morning, when I found a message that shattered every doubt. The morning everything changed began like any other, with the soft gray light slipping through our bedroom curtains and the faint hum of traffic rising from the street below. David had already left for work, something he'd started doing more often, leaving early, returning late, disappearing in the spaces of our life where he used to exist. I sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes, gathering myself before heading to the kitchen to make coffee. I reached for my phone, which had fallen between the couch cushions the night before. As I pulled it out, I noticed another phone wedged against the fabric, David's work phone. He must have dropped it while rushing out the door. For a moment, I froze. I had never gone through his phone before. It felt like crossing a line, but something inside me whispered that the truth was already there, waiting. I held the phone in my hands for several seconds, breathing slowly, trying to steady the shaking in my fingers. Every memory of our early years together, the laughter, the long drives, the way he once looked at me, flashed through my mind, fighting against the dread pooling in my chest. Then, as if guided by instinct more than intention, I pressed the power button and the screen lit up. A message notification appeared immediately. One name, one initial, AC. My heart stumbled in my chest. It wasn't the first time I'd seen those initials, but this time the message preview was unmistakable. Last night was perfect. Same time tonight? My breath left my body in a slow, painful rush. I opened the message thread with trembling hands. There were weeks of conversations, late-night messages, photos, words no married man should ever write, words that made my stomach twist. Ava wasn't just a colleague, she was the center of his attention, the spark in his messages, the one receiving tenderness that used to belong to me. I scrolled through each message feeling smaller, like the room around me was shrinking. I kept waiting for something that explained it all away, something innocent, something that softened the blow. But there was nothing, only proof, and more proof, and the final, crushing proof. A message from Ava, "Your wife still believes you, doesn't she?" Followed by his reply, "She always will. Emily trusts too easily." That was the moment my knees gave out. I sank onto the couch, pressing the phone to my chest as if holding it would stop the ache spreading through me. Trust too easily. The words echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. I thought of every dinner alone, every night he worked late, every argument he dodged, every time he looked through me instead of at me. All of it made sense now. All of it had a reason. And that reason was her. I sat there for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum and the distant horns outside, feeling my world tilt off its axis. I didn't confront him immediately. I needed a moment to breathe, to think, to understand what came next. But as I stood to put the phone down, another message appeared. "Are you telling her at the gala, or should I?" My hand instinctively covered my mouth. The gala, the event at the plaza. I had believed it was a night to celebrate David's achievements. I had bought a new dress, fixed my hair, convinced myself we were turning a corner. But now I saw the truth clearly. He wasn't planning a celebration. He was planning an unveiling, a replacement, a humiliation. I felt my heart tighten in a way I had never felt before. Sharp, cold, final. I wasn't just losing my marriage. I was being pushed out of it. And the man I loved was preparing to make the entire world watch. But I had no idea that the gala would be far worse than anything I imagined. The night of the gala arrived with a cold wind sweeping down Fifth Avenue, rattling the bare branches of the trees lining the street. I stood before the mirror in our bedroom, smoothing the fabric of the navy dress I had chosen days earlier with such naive hope. It wasn't glamorous like the gowns at high-end Manhattan events, but it was elegant, simple, and felt like me. I curled my hair, added a touch of soft makeup, and tried to steady the shaking in my chest. I knew what I had seen on David's phone. I knew the betrayal was real. And yet, part of me still clung to the tiny foolish hope that he wouldn't truly go through with humiliating me in public. That maybe, just maybe, he would choose kindness over cruelty. But deep down, I understood the truth. I was walking into a storm with no umbrella and no shelter. When we stepped into the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, warm golden light reflected off crystal chandeliers, and the air buzzed with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. The room smelled faintly of lilies and champagne, and the floor gleamed beneath the heels of New York's wealthiest financiers and executives. It was a world David loved, a world where he felt powerful, admired, untouchable. I walked beside him, struggling to match his pace, my heart pounding beneath the soft fabric of my dress. He didn't look at me, didn't offer his arm, didn't even acknowledge that I existed. He walked ahead, shoulders squared, scanning the room for someone I knew he wanted to see. Ava. My eyes found her before his did. She wore a silver gown that shimmered like ice under the ballroom lights, hugging her body with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She laughed with a group of David's co-workers, her Cartier bracelet catching the light with every gesture. When she noticed us, her smile stretched wider. Not warm, not polite, but victorious. A silent announcement. I won. You lost. David saw her too, and in that moment he changed. His posture softened, his expression warmed, and I watched, heartbreaking, as he walked directly toward her, leaving me standing near a table draped in white linen. I followed, but slower, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached them, Ava placed her hand on David's arm as if she had claimed him long ago. I waited for him to step away, to remove her hand, to show even the smallest hint of shame, but he didn't. Instead, he turned to me and said, with the coldest voice I had ever heard, "Emily, you remember Ava, don't you? Remember her?" I barely recognized the woman standing before me, not because I didn't know her, but because I had never imagined she would look at me with such open triumph. Her eyes traveled from my dress to my face, slowly, judgingly, savoring the moment. "It's lovely to see you here," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "David told me you've been busy." The word stung. Busy suffering, busy crying, busy pretending. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, to demand explanations, but all the words tangled inside my chest. Then, without warning, Ava slipped her arm around David's waist. The small crowd around us went silent. A few people gasped. Someone whispered my name. My breath caught, my vision blurred, and just when I thought it couldn't get more humiliating, David stepped onto the stage as the music faded and the spotlight centered on him. Ava stayed below, watching with a smirk, knowing exactly what was about to happen. He cleared his throat, looked over the crowd, and then his eyes landed on me. "Tonight," he announced, "marks a new beginning." My heart pounded painfully as every person turned to see my reaction. He paused. The ballroom held its breath, and then he said the words that sliced through me like glass. "I'm done pretending my marriage is working." The moment David's words echoed through the ballroom, something inside me cracked so sharply I swore the entire room heard it. Conversations stopped. Forks froze midair. Even the orchestra hesitated before continuing with a softer, uncertain tune. I stood rooted to the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe, as my husband publicly announced the end of our marriage, like it was some kind of corporate update. My face felt hot, but my hands were ice cold. The chandelier above me blurred as tears stung my eyes, though I fought desperately not to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. Not while he looked down at me from that stage like I was a burden he was finally free of. He continued speaking, but the words turned into distant echoes I couldn't process. Phrases like new direction, personal clarity, and moving on floated through the room, each one a blade slicing away the last remnants of the life I thought we shared. Ava stood near the stage, her lips curled in a small, satisfied smile, the kind of smile that told me she had won something she had never deserved. She didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look guilty. She looked proud. My legs finally moved, almost on their own, carrying me backward through the crowd. People parted to let me through, whispering, staring, pitying. I wanted to disappear into the floor, melt into the marble, anything to escape those eyes. When I reached the hallway outside the ballroom, I gasped as though I had been underwater for too long. The carpet felt strangely uneven beneath my heels, and I had to steady myself against a wall. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. I walked quickly, blindly, past the elevators and the front desk through the grand lobby of the plaza, until the revolving doors released me into the freezing Manhattan night. The wind hit my face instantly, sharp and unforgiving. I wrapped my arms around myself and began walking down Fifth Avenue, my breath visible in the cold air. The city lights glowed around me, but everything felt muted, distant, unreachable. Cars rushed past, horns blaring, people laughing, taxis braking at crosswalks. Life continued while mine had fallen apart. I don't know how long I walked, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. My heels clicked against the sidewalk. My dress swayed with every shiver, and tears finally spilled down my cheeks, warm against the icy wind. I didn't wipe them away. I couldn't. I felt like a ghost drifting through a world that no longer recognized me. When I finally stopped, I found myself near the edge of Central Park. The trees stood still and dark, their branches like long, silent arms reaching toward the sky. I sank onto a bench, burying my face in my hands as the full weight of everything crashed down. The messages, the lies, the gala, the look in his eyes, the humiliation. I had given 7 years of my life to a man who didn't just stop loving me, he wanted to destroy me on his way out. For a few minutes, I let myself break. Really break. Shoulders shaking, breath uneven, heart aching so deeply it felt physical. I didn't think about the future. I didn't think about strength or healing or moving on. All I felt was pain, raw, heavy, overwhelming. But then, through my tears, I heard footsteps approaching. Slow, hesitant, familiar. I lifted my head and saw him standing there, breathless, searching my face with concern I hadn't seen in a long time. Michael. He didn't say a word at first. He just knelt in front of me, his eyes soft, full of understanding and something else, something that made my chest tighten. And then, quietly, he asked, "Emily, what did he do to you?" And that was the moment everything began to shift, even if I didn't know it yet. Seeing Michael there in the dim light outside Central Park felt like watching a single steady candle appear in a room full of darkness. His presence alone made the cold wind feel a little less sharp. His breath formed small clouds as he looked at me, waiting, giving me the space to speak when my voice was still trembling. For a long moment, I couldn't answer. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, the grief inside me would pour out too violently. But he didn't push. He simply sat beside me on the bench, leaving just enough space to show respect, but close enough that I didn't feel alone. Finally, I whispered, "He ended our marriage in front of everyone." The words tasted bitter, like something spoiled. Saying them aloud made the pain real in a way it hadn't been moments earlier. Michael lowered his head, jaw tightening the way it always did when he was trying to contain emotion. "I'm so sorry, Emily," he murmured. "You didn't deserve that. Not in private, and certainly not in front of a room full of people." His voice was calm, but I could hear anger simmering beneath it. Not loud anger, protective anger. The kind I had never felt from David in all our years together. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "He planned it," I whispered. "I saw the messages. He and Ava talked about it like it was some performance." My voice cracked on the last word, and Michael slowly exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Unbelievable," he said softly. "I knew he was pulling away, but this is cruelty." I hugged my arms tighter around myself, shivering not from the wind, but from the weight of humiliation. For a long moment, we just sat there in silence while the city moved around us, the distant sirens, the faint rustling of trees, the headlights streaking across the pavement. And then Michael took off his coat and gently placed it over my shoulders. I tried to protest, but he shook his head. "Emily," he said quietly, "let me be here for you tonight." His coat was warm, smelling faintly of cedar and clean laundry, a smell that reminded me of safety, something I hadn't felt in months. I breathed in deeply, letting the warmth settle into my skin, and for the first time since stepping into that ballroom, I felt my heartbeat begin to steady. "How did you find me?" I asked. He hesitated. "I saw you leave the ballroom. I saw his announcement. And when you ran out, I couldn't let you face this alone." Something in my chest softened. David had walked away without a second glance. Michael had run after me. We talked for a while, slow, halting, tender conversation that flowed between moments of silence. I told him about the messages, about the earring I'd found, about the night spent waiting for David to come home. Michael listened with the kind of attention that feels rare in this world, the kind that made me feel seen rather than judged. "Emily," he said finally, "you didn't fail. He did." He broke something precious because he didn't know how to value it. His words slipped into the cracks of my heart, warm and steadying. I didn't know how to respond. Not yet. So instead, I leaned slightly against him, letting my shoulder rest near his arm. He didn't move. He didn't take advantage. He simply stayed, solid and warm and present, until the cold night around us felt a little less merciless. After a long silence, Michael stood and offered me his hand. "Come on," he said softly. "You shouldn't go home alone tonight." I stared at his hand, my breath catching. Not because I feared him, but because I feared what came next. Life was shifting, changing, cracking open in ways I didn't yet understand. I reached for his hand, and in that moment, something inside me whispered that the story I thought had ended was very far from over. Michael led me away from the park with a steady calm that eased the raw ache inside my chest. We walked slowly toward his car, a dark Mercedes parked near the curb, its headlights casting a soft glow across the pavement. The city moved around us in its usual rush, yet for the first time in months, I felt strangely still, like the world had paused just long enough for me to breathe again. When we reached the car, Michael opened the passenger door without a word, waiting until I settled in before closing it gently, as if he feared I might shatter. He drove with quiet focus, giving me room to think while never letting me feel abandoned in my grief. The streets blurred past in streaks of gold and red until we reached his apartment building overlooking the river. It wasn't extravagant, but it was warm, uncluttered, and peaceful, in a way that made my exhausted body feel safe the moment I stepped inside. He offered me tea, but I couldn't drink anything. My hands were still trembling from everything that had happened. Instead, I sat on his couch, staring at the soft lamplight, feeling the weight of the night settle deeper into my bones. Michael sat across from me, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, watching with a quiet concern that steadied me more than I expected. He didn't ask me to explain the entire story. He just let me unravel it at my own pace. As I spoke, the humiliation spilled out in fragments. The messages, the lies, the staged betrayal at the gala, the applause he expected from people who barely knew me. Each word felt heavy, but saying them made the truth clearer, sharper, and somehow easier to carry. Michael's face tightened as he listened, not in pity but in anger, real, controlled anger on my behalf. When I finally stopped talking, the room felt quiet, except for the soft hum of the heater. I wiped the tears from my cheeks, embarrassed by how much I had exposed, but Michael spoke gently, like he already knew the words I needed to hear. He said that what David did wasn't a simple betrayal. It was a calculated cruelty, something no one could endure alone. His voice held a warmth I hadn't felt in years, a reassurance that wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time that night, my breathing steadied, and the tears finally slowed. But beneath the comfort, a deeper fear lingered. The fear of what came next, of what David would do when he realized I was no longer under his control. Michael must have sensed that because he moved to sit beside me, his voice softer than before, as he said I wouldn't face anything alone. The promise in his words settled into me like a seed, small but strong, something that hinted at hope, even in the ruins of everything I'd lost. I didn't know where life was pulling me, but as I leaned back against the couch, I sensed a shift, subtle, fragile, but unmistakable. The kind of shift that happens right before a new chapter begins, even if you can't yet see its shape. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth around me sink deeper than the pain. But as my breathing steadied, the night wasn't done with me yet, because a single notification buzzed on my phone, and everything inside me tightened once more. It was David, demanding answers. Unaware, his control over my life was already slipping away from him. Michael glanced at my phone the moment it buzzed, but he didn't reach for it. He waited for me to decide. My hands trembled as I picked it up. David's message was short, cold, and cutting. "Where are you? Don't make this harder." As if I were the one who created the nightmare. as if I owed him anything after the way he ripped my dignity apart in front of a ballroom. I stared at the words until they blurred. Michael watched my face carefully, then spoke with a calm steadiness that kept me from falling apart again. "You don't have to answer him tonight," he said. "He lost the right to demand anything from you." His voice was firm, certain, protective, in a way that soothed something bruised inside me. I set the phone face down on the coffee table, but a knot remained tight in my chest, pulsing with leftover fear and shock. I leaned back, exhausted, and whispered, "I don't even know who I am after tonight." Michael shifted closer, not touching me, but close enough that I felt his warmth. "You're someone stronger than you realize," he said. "Stronger than him. Stronger than what he tried to do to you." My throat tightened. No one had spoken to me like that in a long time. Certainly not David, who had spent the last year making me feel small, replaceable, invisible. I breathed slowly, letting Michael's words settle over me like a soft shield. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered across the river, moving gently with the current, reminding me that life hadn't stopped, not even for my heartbreak. We talked quietly for a while, my voice raw as I pieced together the moments leading up to the betrayal. Every late night at the office, every excuse, every lie. Michael listened with an intensity that made me feel seen instead of judged. When I finally fell silent, he spoke gently. "I saw him change months ago," he admitted. "I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I wish I had stepped in sooner." I shook my head. "You didn't owe me anything," I whispered. "He owed me honesty." Michael looked down, jaw tight. "He owed you the world, Emily." Those words lingered in the air, heavy, honest, unexpected. And then something inside me cracked open, not in pain, but in relief. I hadn't realized how starved I was for simple kindness. I took a breath, deeper than before, and felt warmth return to places that had gone cold. Still, another fear rose in me, sharp and trembling. What if he doesn't leave me alone? Michael's expression darkened at the thought. "If he pushes you, I'll step in. I'll make sure he understands he can't keep hurting you." His voice held an edge I had never heard from him, a quiet, controlled strength that made me feel safe in a way I didn't trust myself to feel yet. He reached for a blanket and draped it around my shoulders, careful never to cross a line. I pulled it close, grateful for the softness. My body ached from the emotional wreckage of the night, but for the first time in hours, my heart felt steady. I looked at Michael, really looked at him. The kindness in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice, the way he showed up when everyone else looked away. A realization slipped into my mind, quiet but undeniable. I wasn't alone. Not tonight. Not anymore. He met my gaze, studying my expression with gentle patience. "Emily," he said softly, "you're safe here." And for the first time since the gala, I believed it. But just as the calm began to settle, my phone buzzed again, with a message that changed everything. The second buzz of my phone sliced through the quiet like a blade. I felt Michael tense beside me, his eyes shifting toward the screen with protective alertness. My heart pounded as I reached for the phone, afraid to look but even more afraid not to. The message preview froze me in place. "I'm coming to get you." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The tone wasn't worried or apologetic, it was commanding, possessive. The voice of a man who still believed he controlled my life. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as I opened the message. David had sent 3 more texts, each more demanding than the last. "Answer me. You can't disappear like this. We're talking tonight." His words made my skin crawl. After everything he had done, after all the humiliation, he still felt entitled to my presence. I stared at the screen, stunned. "He's not stopping," I whispered. Michael leaned forward, placing his elbows on his knees. "He's trying to manipulate you. Do not respond." His calm certainty made my breath steady for a moment, but fear still pressed against my ribs. "What if he comes here?" I asked. Michael's jaw tightened. "He won't get near you. Not tonight, not any night." The quiet strength in his voice settled deep inside me. I wasn't used to feeling protected. The sensation was overwhelming, both frightening and comforting. I set the phone down, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pressed my palms against my knees, trying to steady myself. "I keep thinking I did something wrong," I said, voice cracking, like if I had been smarter or prettier or more successful, maybe he wouldn't have. Michael cut me off gently but firmly. "No, stop. This isn't your failure. He made choices rooted in selfishness, not in your worth. My lips trembled as tears filled my eyes again. He moved closer, slowly, giving me time to pull away if I needed to, but I didn't. The warmth of his presence wrapped around me like a safety I hadn't felt in years. "Emily," he continued, his voice low and sincere, "I've known you for years. You're kind, loyal, stronger than you realize. He didn't betray you because you lacked something. He betrayed you because he lacked everything." His words hit a place inside me I didn't even know was wounded. A soft sob escaped my lips before I could stop it. The dam broke. Months of fear, disappointment, numbness, and heartbreak spilled out in silence and tears. I covered my face with my hands, ashamed of how small I felt. Michael didn't hesitate. He reached out, gently pulling my hands away from my face, holding them in his. His touch was warm, grounding. "You don't have to hide from me," he whispered. I looked into his eyes and saw no judgment, only tenderness, patience, and something deeper, something he didn't dare name yet. And maybe I wasn't ready to name it either. I leaned into him, slowly, cautiously, my forehead resting against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around me, not possessive, not eager, just steady, present, human. My tears dampened his shirt, but he didn't move away. Instead, he held me until the trembling eased, until the storm inside me softened to a quiet ache. His heartbeat was steady beneath my cheek, and the warmth of his chest made me feel, for the first time all night, like life hadn't ended, just shifted. Minutes passed, soft, silent, healing minutes, before I finally pulled back slightly to look at him. His eyes searched mine, full of sincerity. Something warm flickered in my chest, something terrifying and beautiful all at once. I didn't have words for it yet, neither did he, but then he leaned in, slowly, giving me time to stop him. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, gentle, hesitant, aching with everything left unspoken. The kiss was soft, not rushed, not hungry. It was a question, an apology, a promise. And answering it changed the direction of my life forever. But what neither of us knew was that this moment, the quietest one, would lead to the twist that none of us were prepared for. The morning after that fragile, unexpected kiss, sunlight spilled softly through Michael's apartment windows, warming my face before I even opened my eyes. For one brief moment, I forgot the humiliation at the plaza, the messages, the pain. My mind floated somewhere calm, safe, and then reality returned like a punch to the ribs. I sat up slowly, the blanket slipping off my shoulders. Michael had slept on the couch, giving me the bedroom without question. That small act of respect tightened something warm in my chest. I walked out quietly and found him already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, staring out at the river. He turned when he heard me, offering a gentle, tired smile. "Morning?" he said softly. "How are you feeling?" I opened my mouth, but no simple answer existed. "Like everything hurts, but less than yesterday," I admitted. He nodded, understanding without pressing. He offered me coffee, and we sat together in a quiet that felt strangely peaceful. But peace only lasted a few minutes, because as I sipped from the warm mug, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over me. Not dramatic, but sharp enough to make me pause. Michael noticed instantly. "Are you okay?" he asked, reaching out but stopping just short of touching my arm. I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know, I just feel off." He watched me for a moment, eyes narrowing in thought. "Emily," he said carefully, "when was your last cycle?" My heart skipped. I stared at the mug in my hands, heat rising in my cheeks. I don't know. Everything's been chaos. I haven't been keeping track." Another dizzy wave hit, stronger this time. Michael stood immediately. "Wait here." He grabbed his coat and keys. "I'll be back in 5 minutes." True to his word, he returned with a small paper bag from the pharmacy. My breath caught when he pulled out a pregnancy test. My pulse hammered in my ears. "Michael? I don't think." "Emily," he said softly, "no pressure. But you've been under stress. We need clarity." My hands trembled as he placed the box gently in front of me. I stared at it like it was a doorway to two entirely different futures. My throat tightened. "If I'm pregnant," I whispered, it wouldn't be David's." Michael's jaw flexed, but his voice stayed steady. "I know." I took the test into the bathroom, closing the door behind me. The silence was suffocating. My fingers shook so hard I could barely open the packaging. When the test was finally ready, I set it on the counter and stared at it, unable to breathe. Seconds felt like hours. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. My entire world hung inside that tiny plastic stick. When the result line slowly appeared, clear and undeniable, my breath collapsed into a choked cry. Pregnant. I was pregnant. Tears blurred my vision. Tears of shock, fear, disbelief, and a strange hint of something like hope. I opened the door with trembling hands. Michael stood immediately, reading my expression before I said a word. "Emily?" His voice softened, careful, almost breaking. I held up the test. His breath hitched, eyes widening, not with fear, but with something deep and raw. He stepped closer, slowly giving me space. "It's positive," I whispered, voice shaking. For a moment he said nothing, just looked at me with a tenderness that made my knees weak. Then he reached out, cupping my trembling hands in his own. "We'll figure this out," he whispered. "You're not alone. Not for a single second." I exhaled shakily, feeling the truth settle over me, heavy, overwhelming, life-changing. But before I could say anything else, my phone buzzed again. I looked down and felt the blood drain from my face. It was David, this time calling nonstop. And he had already realized I never came home. David's name lit up my phone again and again, each call more frantic than the last, as if he had suddenly discovered a sense of urgency he never showed while destroying our marriage. My stomach tightened every time the phone vibrated, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Michael watched me carefully, his posture alert, ready to intervene if anything escalated. "You don't owe him a single word," he said quietly, and the steadiness in his voice grounded me. Still, I felt a familiar fear rising in my chest. Fear of confrontation, fear of losing control, fear of the man who had humiliated me so easily. When the phone finally stopped ringing, a message appeared. Just one sentence. "I know you're not at home. Where are you?" A cold shiver crawled up my spine. His words weren't filled with regret or concern. They carried possession, like he still believed he owned me. Michael stepped closer, gently placing a hand on the table near mine, not touching, just reminding me he was there. "He's scared," he said. "Not for you, of losing control." I exhaled shakily. He never cared this much before. Michael shook his head slowly. "He cared about appearances. You leaving breaks his illusion." His words rang painfully true. David losing me wasn't about love. It was about losing the version of himself he liked to show the world. My phone buzzed again, this time a voice message. I hesitated before pressing play. David's voice came through sharp, angry, cracking around the edges. "Emily, pick up. We need to talk. You can't disappear after a night like that. I'm coming home early. Be there." He was speaking to me like he still expected obedience. A small tremor went through my chest. A leftover piece of fear I hated still existed. Michael noticed instantly. "Don't go back there alone," he said. "It's not safe for your heart or your mind." I nodded, gripping the pregnancy test still lying on the table. My eyes burned again. "He has no idea," I whispered. "No idea my life has already changed." Michael's expression softened. "You don't have to tell him, not now, not ever, unless it's your choice." But I knew David. If he sensed any change in me, he would push, question, pry, manipulate, and once he realized I didn't return home, he would come looking. He had already shown how far his pride could go. "I can't hide this forever," I murmured. "He'll find out eventually." Michael shook his head. "Emily, this isn't his story anymore. It's yours." Before I could respond, my phone erupted again, this time with a message that made my heart stop. "I'm already outside the building." My breath caught. "He's here?" Michael moved instantly, stepping toward the window. He peered through the blinds, jaw tightening. "He's downstairs, pacing." My pulse hammered so loudly I could hear it. "He can't see me here," I whispered. "He'll twist everything." Michael turned to me, calm but firm. "Then he won't see you." He guided me to the hallway, away from the windows, his voice steady. "You stay here. I'll handle him." Panic shot through me. "No, you don't have to." "Emily," he said gently, "I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for you." I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I trusted him in a way that scared me and comforted me all at once. He walked toward the door with a steady confidence I had never seen in David. The contrast was jarring. One man controlling through fear, the other protecting with quiet strength. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to steady my breath as the elevator dinged in the hallway. A knock followed. Sharp. Impatient. Michael opened the door, and David's voice stormed into the apartment. "Where is my wife?" Michael stepped into the doorway before David could barge inside, blocking his view with a calmness that only seemed to enrage David further. The hallway light cast sharp shadows across David's face, twisting his expression into something bitter and unfamiliar. His tie was crooked, his hair disheveled, as if he'd rushed here in a panic. "Move," David snapped, trying to push past him. Michael didn't budge. "You're not coming in." His voice was low, controlled. But David scoffed, eyes darting over Michael's shoulder, searching for me. "She's my wife. I have every right to see her." "No," Michael said firmly. "You lost that right the moment you humiliated her in front of an entire ballroom." David's jaw clenched. "This is none of your business." Michael stepped forward just enough to force David back an inch. "Then stop making it mine." Their voices weren't loud, but the tension between them crackled like electricity in the air. From where I stood down the hallway, hidden behind the corner, I could hear every word. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. David's voice lowered, more threatening now. "Where is she?" Michael didn't flinch. "Safe." David let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Safe? With you?" His voice dripped with envy. "You always hovered around her, didn't you? Even when we were married." Michael's jaw tightened. "I respected your marriage more than you ever did." David's face twisted. "You think you're a hero?" He leaned closer, his voice sharp. "You think she belongs to you now?" The words hit me like a slap. "Belongs." As if I were an object being disputed. My breath trembled. I stepped back, pressing a hand against the wall to steady myself. Michael remained calm, but a cold edge slipped into his voice. "Emily doesn't belong to anyone. She makes her own choices, and right now she doesn't want to see you." David's eyes burned with fury. "She will." He shoved Michael hard, trying to force his way inside. Michael caught his shoulder immediately, pushing him back, not aggressively, but with firm strength. "David, enough." But David didn't stop. He pushed again, this time harder, fueled by jealousy, ego, and the terror of losing control. Michael reacted quickly, stopping him mid-motion, holding him back with both hands. "Get your hands off me," David shouted. The sound echoed through the hallway. A door down the hall cracked open, a neighbor peering out. David charged again, fists clenched, but Michael tightened his grip and spoke through gritted teeth. "Walk away." David froze, breathing hard, sweat forming at his temples. For a moment, he looked shocked, maybe even ashamed to be physically restrained by the man he once called his closest friend. But shame quickly twisted back into rage. "You don't get to take her from me," he yelled. Michael stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. "You already lost her. She saw everything. She knows everything. And you have no one to blame but yourself." David's face drained of color. "She knows." Michael didn't soften. "Every message, every plan, every lie, she's done." David staggered back, the words hitting him like blows. His breathing quickened, panic flooding his eyes. "She can't be done," he muttered, almost to himself. "She wouldn't leave. She wouldn't do that to me." His voice cracked on the last word, then his phone buzzed. He looked down. Ava. Her name lit up in bright white letters. David stared at it, and something in his expression collapsed, fear mixed with dread and something uglier. Michael watched him carefully. "You should get that," he said coldly. "Your priorities are calling." David swallowed hard, hesitating. The phone buzzed again. This time he answered, and Ava's voice shrieked through the speaker so loudly I heard it from the hallway. "David, tell me why people at the office are saying you're losing your job." Ava's shrill voice spilled from David's phone like an unwelcome echo down the hallway. Michael didn't move, but David stepped back, pressing the phone to his ear with shaking fingers. "What are you talking about?" he hissed, trying to lower his voice. Ava didn't care. "Don't play dumb, David. They're saying the partners asked for a review of every expense report you filed. They're talking about misconduct." "Misconduct, David." Her words cracked with panic. Michael raised an eyebrow, almost amused. David shot him a cold glare, turning away to face the elevator. "Calm down," he muttered. "It's a misunderstanding." But Ava's voice only grew louder. "A misunderstanding? They mentioned your hotel stays, David. The ones you said were business trips. They know I was with you." Silence hit the hallway like a physical blow. David's shoulders slumped as if a weight had landed squarely on his back. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Ava, don't talk about this on the phone." "Oh, now you care about privacy?" she snapped. "You promised me that job offer. You told me we were building something, and now you're dragging me down?" Her tone shifted, sharp with accusation. "Fix this, David. Fix it, or I swear." The line cut off. David lowered the phone slowly, staring at nothing. I watched from the hallway's shadows, my heart pounding. Not out of fear this time, but recognition. His world was cracking apart. And for the first time, I didn't feel small watching it happen. Michael closed the door softly, shutting out David's presence like extinguishing a flame. Then he walked toward me. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. My breath shook. "I should be," I whispered. "Then let's get you somewhere you can breathe." He drove me to my apartment so I could collect a few things, staying close without hovering. The building felt different when I walked inside. Cold, hollow, stripped of memories. I grabbed a small suitcase and began folding clothes silently, letting the rhythm soothe me. Michael helped without saying a word, handing me hangers, tucking sweaters into the bag. When I reached the drawer that held my wedding ring box, I paused. My fingers hovered over the velvet. For years, opening that box felt sacred. Tonight it felt like touching ashes. Michael noticed the stillness. "You don't have to take it," he said softly. I shook my head and closed the drawer. I'm done carrying dead weight. When we finished packing, I scanned the apartment one last time. This place had held 7 years of my life, but suddenly, it felt like a cage I'd grown too small for. "Let's go," I whispered. Outside, the wind was cold against my face, but it didn't sting the way it did the night of the gala. I felt lighter. Michael drove me to a temporary rental he had arranged, a quiet apartment near Central Park with soft lighting and clean, uncluttered space. "It's yours as long as you need it," he said. Gratitude swelled in my chest so deeply it almost hurt. "Michael, I don't know how to thank you." He smiled gently. "Just heal, that's all." As I unpacked, the city glowed beyond the window, an invitation instead of a threat. I sat on the couch, touching my stomach gently, still overwhelmed by the life growing inside me. For the first time, the fear didn't overpower everything else. There was hope, a faint, flickering hope, but real. I was rebuilding, piece by piece, breath by breath. Then, just as I allowed myself to exhale, my phone lit up with a new message from an unknown number. "Emily, you don't know the full story. Meet me tomorrow. It's about David, and you're not safe if you don't hear this." I stared at the message from the unknown number for several long seconds, my pulse quickening. The words felt strange, warning, urgency, danger. But before I could make sense of them, my phone buzzed again. This time, the name flashing across the screen made my stomach sink. "David." I hesitated, breath catching, before answering. His voice came through shaky, rushed, almost desperate. "Emily, please, I need to see you." I said nothing. Silence was the only shield I had left. He continued, words tumbling over each other. "I'm sorry. About the gala, about how it looked. I lost control. I made mistakes." He inhaled sharply. "Just come home. We can talk. We can fix this." "Fix this?" My hand tightened around the phone. "David," I whispered, "there's nothing left to fix." He ignored the words completely. I was angry. I felt trapped. The firm pressured me. Ava pressured me. Everything got twisted. But I never stopped caring about you. A hollow ache formed in my chest. But it wasn't longing. It was grief for the person I used to be, the woman who would have accepted crumbs and called it love. "I know you stayed with Michael," he added suddenly, his voice hardening. "You don't have to lie." He opened the door. My breath froze. "So what?" I replied. "You lost the right to question where I go." His silence sparked something bitter in me, a realization that for 7 years I had traded my voice for the illusion of stability. Then his tone shifted, cracking at the edges. "Emily, come home." The plea in his voice didn't move me. It only reminded me of the years I begged him to see me while he drifted further away. "No," I said simply. David inhaled sharply as if the word punched the air out of him. "Please," he whispered, voice nearly breaking. "Don't do this." I closed my eyes and asked quietly, "Why now, David? Why only after you lost control?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, the truth cut deeper than any lie he'd told. "Because I didn't think you'd ever leave." A sharp, painful clarity swept through me. There it was, not love, not remorse, just fear of losing possession. Before I could respond, he continued quickly, desperation leaking into every syllable. "We can start fresh. You can quit your job, we'll move somewhere new. I'll do better, I swear." Quit my job? Move? Suddenly I saw the shape of the life he wanted. A smaller me. A quieter me. A controllable me. The old me might have bent. The The new me, reborn from humiliation and pain, would not. David, I said calmly, I'm pregnant. Silence exploded on the line. I waited 1 second, 2, 3, then he inhaled sharply. Emily, oh my God, are you serious? His voice shifted instantly, hopeful, triumphant, possessive. We can fix everything. This changes things. I can be better. I can be a father. It's not yours. The words sliced through the line like a blade. The silence that followed was different, darker, shaking, stunned. What did you just say? His voice was low, trembling. The baby isn't yours, I repeated, and you have no claim on me anymore. A choked sound came from him, something between disbelief and rage. You cheated on me? I was already abandoned, I said quietly. You left long before I ever did. I heard him pacing, breathing hard. With him? With Michael, my best friend? I closed my eyes. He was there when you weren't. Something crashed on his end. Maybe a lamp, maybe a chair. This is insane, he spat. You think he loves you? You think this will last? You have no idea what you're doing. His voice was unraveling, cracking at the seams of the perfect image he'd built his life around. Emily, please, he whispered suddenly, voice small. Don't let this happen. Don't take everything from me. But I didn't take anything. He threw everything away. With a steady breath, I ended the call. The room fell silent. My heart hammered, but not from fear, from clarity. I turned, expecting to be alone. But Michael was standing in the doorway, eyes full of worry and something deeper. Before I could speak, he stepped forward. Emily, he's not done, and the next thing he does will change everything. Michael walked toward me slowly, his face tight with something heavier than worry. My heartbeat quickened. What do you mean he's not done? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael rubbed a hand over his jaw, exhaling sharply. I didn't want to tell you tonight, not while you're shaking, but there's something you need to know. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air too still. I gripped the back of the couch to steady myself. Tell me. He hesitated just long enough to terrify me. David went to your hotel this morning, your workplace. He talked to your manager. My breath caught. Why? What did he do? Michael's expression hardened. He told them you were unstable, that you walked out on your job, that you were having some sort of mental break. My knees nearly buckled. He what? Michael nodded, anger simmering behind his calm voice. The manager didn't believe him. She called me. She knows what kind of man he is. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to breathe. Why would he do that? Michael looked me in the eyes. Because if he can't control you directly, he'll try to control the world around you. Your reputation, your work, your stability. A sickening wave rolled through me. I had seen this manipulative side of David before, but never directed at me. Never this destructive. Michael continued, voice lower now. And that's not all. My stomach tightened. There's more? He nodded grimly. Ava called me. My eyes widened. She called you? He nodded again. She's spiraling. She said David told her you'd lied about everything, that you were trying to ruin his career, that you were jealous of her. My jaw clenched. Typical. But then, Michael added, she said something else. Something important. The room felt suddenly colder. I swallowed hard. What did she say? Michael sat down across from me, leaning forward. She said David promised her an engagement, a future, promotions, trips, money. And when his firm started asking questions about the expense reports, he told them she manipulated him. I stared at him in disbelief. He threw her under the bus? Completely, Michael said. She's furious, but more than that, she's scared. And when people like Ava get scared, they start talking. I sank onto the couch, overwhelmed. So why message me? Why warn me? Michael exhaled. Because she found something. My breath stuck in my throat. Found what? He hesitated for a moment that felt like a lifetime. A file David kept. Emails he deleted, messages he hid, things he didn't want you or anyone to see. My pulse thundered. What's in it? Michael shook his head. She wouldn't say over the phone. She told me she wants to meet you. Alone. Tomorrow morning. I leaned back, stunned. Ava wants to help me? Michael shrugged slightly. I don't know if it's help. It might be revenge or fear. But she said one thing clearly. If you don't hear what she found, you won't understand what David is truly capable of. A chill ran through me. I hugged my arms around my stomach, protecting the tiny life growing inside me. Michael, I'm scared. He moved closer, gently placing his hands over mine. I won't let anything happen to you. Not now. Not ever. A quiet settled between us, thick with uncertainty. I looked out the window at the city lights flickering against the dark sky. Everything inside me felt split. Fear tangled with determination, exhaustion battling a rising fire I didn't know I still had. Finally I whispered, "I'll meet her." Michael inhaled sharply, nodding. "Then I'm going with you," she said alone. "I don't care. I'm not letting you walk into anything blind." I nodded slowly, grateful beyond words. But deep in my chest, a new fear bloomed. Because if Ava had turned against David, what she knew could destroy him and burn everything around him in the process. The next morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of Manhattan morning where the sky felt close enough to touch. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, David's voice echoed in my head, accusing, pleading, unraveling. Michael insisted on driving me to the cafe where Ava wanted to meet, a quiet corner spot near Park Avenue with tall windows and warm lighting. I could feel his protective tension as he parked the Mercedes, his hand tightening on the steering wheel. "Emily," he said softly, "if at any moment you feel unsafe, you walk out. I'll be 2 minutes away." I nodded, resting a hand on my stomach for strength. "I'll be okay." Inside, the cafe smelled of roasted coffee and warm pastries. Ava sat alone in the corner, sunglasses on, shoulders tense, stirring her untouched drink. She looked nothing like the confident woman from the plaza. This version of her looked shaken, frayed at the edges. When she saw me, she slid the glasses off, revealing swollen eyes. "Sit." Her voice wasn't cold, just exhausted. I took a seat across from her, my heart hammering. She wasted no time. "Everything's collapsing," she said, voice low. "David lied to everyone, including me." I swallowed, keeping my gaze steady. "I'm not surprised." She let out a humorless laugh. "You should be, because this goes far deeper than cheating." She reached into her bag, pulling out a thin, silver flash drive. She placed it on the table between us like it was something dangerous. "This," she whispered, "is what he was hiding." I stared at it, confused. "What's on it?" Ava leaned in. "Emails between him and the Park Avenue partners. Expense reports, private chats. He used the company credit card for everything. Hotel rooms, gifts, dinners, and blamed it all on client meetings. He even marked our trips as investment scouting." I blinked, shocked. "That's fraud." "Oh, it gets worse," she said, bitterness slipping into her tone. "When someone in the firm noticed inconsistencies, he told them I forged documents to manipulate him. He said I pressured him to spend company money. Me." Her voice cracked. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman who destroyed my marriage, but as another casualty of David's ego. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked softly. Ava looked at me with a tired, defeated expression. "Because he's unraveling. He's blaming everyone. And when men like him fall, they fall violently. I need this out of my hands before he comes after me." She exhaled shakily. "And because you deserve the truth." She pushed the flash drive toward me. My fingers hovered over it, hesitant, trembling. "Ava, I don't know if I should." "Take it," she snapped, then lowered her voice. "If he loses everything, and he will, he'll claim you ruined him. This proves he ruined himself." I slipped the flash drive into my purse, a chill crawling up my spine. Ava looked at me for a long moment before whispering, "I'm sorry, Emily, for all of it." I didn't forgive her, not fully, but I nodded. It was enough. As I stood to leave, Michael stepped inside the cafe, eyes scanning the room until he found me. Ava stiffened, but said nothing. I walked to him, heart pounding. "Let's go," I murmured. We left together, the flash drive feeling impossibly heavy in my purse. Back in the car, Michael asked quietly, "What did she give you?" I handed him the drive. He frowned, turning it over in his fingers. "This could take him down," he said. I nodded. "But he'll come after me first." Michael met my eyes, fierce and unwavering. "Not if we move first." A storm was brewing, tightening around us like a noose. And tomorrow, everything David built would begin to crumble, piece by piece, lie by lie. By that evening, the flash drive burned like a secret in my purse, heavy with everything David never imagined would see the light. Michael spent hours at his dining table, scrolling through files with a seriousness that made my stomach twist. I watched him from the couch, hands resting protectively over my abdomen. The soft light from his desk lamp cast shadows across his jaw, making him look sharper, stronger, someone who belonged on the side of justice. Finally, he exhaled, leaning back. "Emily," he said, "this isn't just misconduct, this is criminal." My breath hitched. He turned the laptop toward me, He forged signatures. He hid receipts. He used the company card for thousands of dollars in unauthorized expenses. He even rerouted an internal audit to bury questionable charges. I swallowed hard. Will this destroy him? Michael met my eyes. Yes. Completely. A strange mix of emotions swirled inside me. Fear, relief, sadness, something like vindication. What do we do now? I whispered. Michael didn't hesitate. We turn it in. He reached for his phone. I know someone on the compliance board. Someone who won't be intimidated by him. I gripped the edge of the couch. Michael, are you sure this will ruin his career, his reputation, everything? He held my gaze firmly. Emily, he tried to ruin you. He wanted to destroy your work, your name, your life. This isn't revenge. This is truth. Before I could respond, there was a pounding at the door. Both of us froze. The knocks were frantic, uneven, desperation in physical form. Michael's expression darkened. Stay here. My pulse raced. Michael, Emily, don't move. He walked to the door and looked through the peephole. His jaw tightened. It's him. Fear shot through me. I instinctively covered my stomach. The knocking grew louder. Emily, open the door. David's voice cracked with anger. I know you're in there. I saw your car outside. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trembling. Michael kept his composure as he opened the door just enough to block the entrance. You need to leave. David shoved against the door, unhinged. Get out of my way. Michael didn't budge. No. David's voice rose, wild. She ruined me. You think I don't know? The partners called me today. They said someone sent files only I had. My heart stopped. He knew. He knew the walls were closing in. I didn't send anything, I whispered, stepping closer without thinking. Michael turned sharply. Emily, stay back. But David had already heard me. His eyes snapped toward the sound of my voice, and when he saw me behind Michael, something twisted inside him. Rage, panic, betrayal. You, he seemed. I shook my head. No, David, you did this. Every lie, every receipt, every night you spent with her instead of facing yourself. He lunged forward, but Michael slammed the door shut, locking it with a final click. David pounded on the other side, screaming threats, pleas, apologies, all blending into one pathetic storm. I backed away, breath shaking, tears blurring my vision. After several minutes, the hallway fell silent. Michael exhaled slowly, shoulders finally relaxing. He's gone. I sank onto the couch, overwhelmed. He won't stop, I whispered. Michael sat beside me, taking my hands in his. He will, because after tonight, he won't have the power to come after anyone. The next morning came with a phone call from the Park Avenue firm. Michael put it on speaker. Thank you for the submission, the compliance director said. We have everything we need. We'll proceed immediately. My heart pounded. What does that mean? The director replied, It means Mr. Miller will be removed today, effective immediately. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. 7 years of pain exhaled in one trembling breath. David Miller, the man who tried to break me, was officially ruined. But I didn't know the moment he fell. He would reach for the last thing he had left, me. The call confirming David's removal should have felt like closure, like the final door slamming shut on a painful chapter of my life. But instead it left a trembling silence in its wake, a silence filled with uncertainty, relief, and a strange ache for the woman I used to be. Michael ended the call, set his phone down, and looked at me with soft, steady eyes. It's over, he said gently. I nodded, but my breath came shaky. Then why does it still hurt? His expression softened. Because endings hurt, even when they're right. I leaned back against the couch, my hand resting instinctively on my growing belly. A new beginning lived inside me, but part of me still had to mourn the ghost of a life I thought I'd have. Later that afternoon, Michael drove me to Central Park, insisting we get fresh air after the storm we'd weathered. The trees stood bare, their branches etched against a pale winter sky, but the quiet felt grounding. We walked slowly along the path, our steps falling into a natural rhythm. My mind drifted to the baby, our baby, and how strange and beautiful it felt to imagine a future that wasn't built on fear or uncertainty. For once I felt calm. But calm never lasted long around David. As we rounded a curve near the Bethesda fountain, I saw him. He was standing alone, his figure stiff, his coat wrinkled as though he hadn't slept. His eyes found me instantly. I froze. Michael stepped slightly in front of me out of instinct, but David lifted a hand, his voice cracking. Please, just a minute. I'm not here to fight. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I don't have anything left to fight with. Michael looked at me, silently giving me the choice. I swallowed hard and nodded. He stayed beside me, close enough that I felt safe. David took a shaky step forward. His eyes were red, tired, desperate. They fired me, he said, voice trembling. I'm finished. Everything is gone. A quiet part of me felt sorry for him, not for the man he was, but for the man he could have been. I'm sorry you're hurting, I said softly, but this was your doing. He nodded slowly, tears forming. I know. Then his gaze dropped to my stomach. Is it true? The wind stilled. My heart kicked. Michael's hand gently tightened near mine. Is it true you're pregnant? I inhaled, bracing myself. Yes. David's face crumpled. And it's his? I hesitated only a moment. Yes. He staggered back as if struck. Emily, why him? I lifted my chin, not in defiance, but in truth. Because he was there when you weren't. Because he protected me when you tried to destroy me. Because he sees me. Tears spilled down David's cheeks. I loved you, he whispered. I always did. My chest tightened, not with longing, but with clarity. Then you should have chosen me before everything fell apart. David looked at Michael, really looked, as if seeing him for the first time. The jealousy, the anger, the bitterness all drained from his face, leaving nothing but emptiness. Take care of her, he whispered. Michael met his gaze steadily. I will. A quiet wind brushed through the park, rustling the leaves around us. David wiped his face with a shaking hand. I'm leaving New York, he said. There's nothing here for me now. He looked at me one last time, not with cruelty, not with victory, with surrender. I hope you find happiness. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like a man fading from his own life. I felt my knees weaken, but Michael caught me instantly, his arm wrapping around my shoulders. I leaned into him, breathing slowly, feeling something inside me finally unclench. Emily, he whispered, you're free now. I looked up at him, my heart full. And that was the moment he dropped to one knee, changing my life forever. Michael knelt on the pathway beside the Bethesda fountain, as though the entire city had fallen suddenly silent for us alone. The winter light shimmered across the water, catching the gentle ripple of the angel statue above. My breath caught in my throat as he looked up at me. Steady, hopeful, vulnerable, in a way that made my heart swell. He didn't reach for a ring, he didn't make a dramatic gesture. He simply took my hands into his warm, steady palms and spoke in a voice that felt like home. Emily, he began softly, I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm not asking for a promise you're not ready for. But I need you to know something. My chest tightened, breath trembling in the cold air. I love you, he continued. Not because you're hurting, not because you needed someone to save you. I love you because you're strong, kind, brave, and because even after everything you've gone through, you still lead with your heart. His thumb brushed gently over my knuckles. I want to build a life with you, with both of you. His gaze dropped to my stomach, tender and reverent. But all I'm asking right now is this. Let me stay by your side. Let me be part of whatever comes next. Warm tears filled my eyes, but they weren't the desperate tears of heartbreak this time. They were tears of release, of something blooming inside me that had nothing to do with fear. Michael, I whispered, I don't know what the future looks like yet. I don't know how to be anything other than rebuilding. He nodded, completely understanding. Then let me rebuild with you. I lowered myself down to my knees in front of him, our faces close, our hands still intertwined. Yes, I whispered. I want you with me. I want this future. Relief and joy washed across his face, a soft, radiant smile breaking through the seriousness. He pulled me into his arms as gentle applause rose from a nearby couple who had witnessed the moment. I laughed through my tears as he held me close, the weight of 7 years lifting from my shoulders as though it had never belonged to me. Over the next months, life transformed. I moved into a sunny apartment overlooking Central Park West, a place filled with warmth, soft blankets, and space for a crib Michael helped build. I returned to work at the hotel, not as a clerk, but as assistant manager after the board heard how gracefully I handled everything. Michael came to every appointment, holding my hand during ultrasounds, smiling as the baby kicked beneath my ribs. And slowly, unbelievably, happiness returned to me. Not as a gift from someone else, but as something I chose, piece by piece. One warm spring afternoon, David appeared one last time. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He simply stood across the street as I left the doctor's office with Michael. His eyes softened as he saw my round belly, saw Michael carrying the baby bag, saw the quiet joy in the way we moved together. Then, without a word, he nodded once, a gesture not of reconciliation but of acceptance, and turned away. I felt no anger anymore, no bitterness, just closure. The day my son was born, Michael held him first, hands steady, eyes shining. He looked at the tiny face, then at me, overwhelmed. "You made this world better," he whispered. "Both of you." I cried, not from pain but from a fullness I had never known. A year later, on a quiet afternoon beneath blooming cherry trees in Central Park, Michael placed a simple ring on my finger. No spectacle, no crowd, just us and the soft rustle of petals falling. And this time I said yes, without hesitation. That night, holding my sleeping son against my chest, I realized something profound. I had lost a marriage, but I had gained my life. I had been broken, but I had rebuilt stronger. And most of all, I had walked through the storm and found a love that didn't need to hurt to exist. Because sometimes the ending you fear the most becomes the beginning you always deserved. And just like that, our story comes to a close. But you, our wonderful friend, if you're still here with us right now, it means something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet, honest way. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Maybe it whispered that healing is possible, even when life breaks you open. As the Stoics often taught, you have power over your mind, not outside events. And that's what Emily learned. Life doesn't always give us the love we deserve, but it always gives us the chance to choose again. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Her heartbreak didn't end her. It rebuilt her. So as you go back to your own life, remember this. You are allowed to walk away from what hurts. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to begin again. And if this story stayed with you, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Give this video a like so more people can feel what you felt. Share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own worth. And subscribe to the channel so you and I can keep taking these journeys together, one story at a time.